Hello, my name is Soraya Venn, daughter, sister, and apparently an estate waiting to be liquidated. They told the court I was unstable, but 5 minutes before I walked into that trap they called family dinner, my lawyer sent me a text that cracked my entire world open, and that's when it all began. The jacket never made it all the way onto my shoulders. One arm halfway in, keys still dangling between my fingers, and then my phone buzzed. One vibration, then another. I barely glanced at the screen, just enough to see the sender. Gerald, my lawyer. Soraya, do not go to your parents' house tonight. Call me immediately. The words didn't land like a warning. They landed like a verdict. I stood still in the kitchen, surrounded by the scent of garlic and rosemary from the pot roast I was planning to reheat when I got back, Callista's favorite. Because that's what this was supposed to be. Family dinner. Something normal. Something forgiving. Instead, I was choking on air. Looking back now, I should have known that text wasn't just urgent. It was surgical. I fumbled with my phone, thumbs suddenly clumsy. The number was saved under Legal Emergency, a title I never expected to use. When Gerald answered, his voice didn't wait for breath. Soraya, are you home? Are you alone? I turned from the door, like someone might be standing behind it. My voice cracked before I could fully speak. Yes. Why? They filed a petition, Soraya. Your father and Callista. You weren't supposed to know yet. My stomach didn't drop. It twisted, knotted into something sharp and unmovable. A petition? My voice sounded far away. They're asking the court to declare you mentally incompetent. If it goes through, they'll become your legal guardians. I remember the way my hand gripped the doorframe, the paint cool against my palm, the corners of the wood biting into my skin. I didn't let go. That's where it all started. He kept speaking, but the words dulled behind the pressure building in my ears. I was still holding the keys, still halfway dressed for a dinner that had never been about dinner at all. Then a ding came from my iPad on the counter. A new email. Something about my home insurance policy. I barely registered it until I saw the attachment. Subject, property documentation, review. There it was. A listing agreement. My house. Address, square footage, valuation. Signed 5 days ago. By my father and my sister. I didn't feel rage. Not then. I felt like the ground moved under me, and I wasn't invited to stand on it anymore. I haven't even left the house. I whispered, more to myself than to him. And they already scheduled the open house. Silence. Then Gerald's voice again, lower now. That contract wasn't supposed to go to you. They used your insurance email by mistake. He paused. Let the weight of it land. They're not protecting you, Soraya. They're removing you. I couldn't breathe through the weight in my chest. I leaned into the counter, closed my eyes. 2 days ago, my father called. His voice was warmer than usual. Come home Sunday, sweetheart. Your sister's making roast, your favorite. Callista texted half an hour later. Pictures of the table set for 6. A little red heart emoji. Looking back, I didn't just fall for it. I wanted to. Family doesn't lure you with pot roast and then write you out of your own address. They probably had paperwork ready. Gerald said, maybe something slipped in power of attorney disguised as medical forms. If you acted confused, if you forgot a word, they could spin it. maybe even record it. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the kitchen window. Outside, my garden sat quiet, untouched. They weren't planning to confront me. They were planning to document my collapse. And I'd nearly handed them the performance they needed. My fingers clenched around my phone. The joints in my hand ached, but I didn't release. I was done playing daughter. I was going to become a defendant. What do I do now? I asked. His voice softened. First, lock your doors. Then, we need to see what else they've filed. This is only the beginning. I walked to the front door, clicked the lock, then the chain, then the deadbolt, each one louder than it should have been. Each one sounded like a goodbye. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. I lay on the couch with the hallway light on, the house too still, too aware of me. When dawn finally cut through the blinds, the pale stripes across the floor looked like lines on a page, waiting for someone else to write my life. I wasn't scared of their plans anymore. I was scared of what I'd find once everything came into view. That's where it all started. I kept replaying Gerald's voice from the night before, his warning looping through my head as I stared at the ceiling. When the knock finally came, a firm, businesslike rhythm, I felt my chest tighten. Not fear. Something sharper, like I was bracing for impact. Gerald stepped inside with a folder tucked under his arm, his expression pulled into that look people get when they're about to hand you news that changes the room. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. He placed the folder in my hands without a word. It felt heavier than paper had any right to be. I opened it, and the first page punched the breath out of me. Petition for guardianship. My father's signature. Callista's signature. My own name printed below. There's like a footnote to a decision I never agreed to. I skimmed the allegations. Paranoia, emotional instability, impaired judgment. It read like an obituary. Except I was still standing in the room. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. There was a summary attached, describing how I supposedly couldn't maintain daily routines. They wrote about me like I was a stranger on the street. I flipped the page, each sentence slicing into something I'd been trying to protect for years. By page 10, my hands were shaking. According to this document, I wasn't capable of managing my own groceries. I couldn't be trusted to drive. I couldn't be expected to make rational financial decisions. It's one thing to be misunderstood. It's another to be rewritten. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Then I reached page 22. A blurry photograph stopped me cold. Me, sitting alone on a park bench, face lowered, shoulders hunched, hair shadowing half my expression. The caption read, "Subject appears disoriented. Remained immobile for an extended period." I felt heat crawl up my neck, a kind of humiliation that wasn't loud, but deep, the kind that folds in on itself. That morning had been the last session with my therapist. I'd left early, sat on the bench while waiting for the bus, thinking about everything I needed to untangle in my life. I was healing, not unraveling. They took my quiet moment and twisted it into evidence of collapse. Looking back, that photo should have told me exactly who I was dealing with. That's where it all started. My mind flicked back to my father's voicemail 2 days earlier. His voice soft, unusually gentle, that tone he saved for holidays or funerals. "Come home Sunday, sweetheart. Your sister's making your favorite." I'd stood in my kitchen, smiling like a fool, letting myself believe dinner meant peace. I didn't realize the invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was bait. They wanted me relaxed, unsuspecting, comfortable enough to walk into a trap. They baited me with dinner and prepared my legal burial behind my back. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Gerald moved beside me, speaking quietly. There's more. Statements from neighbors, edited emails, old notes from your workplace. He handed me another stack. I flipped through them, my heart knocking against my ribs. One neighbor claimed I forgot her name twice in 1 week. Another said I seemed confused when handing out Halloween candy. A former co-worker reported I looked lost during a meeting after my divorce. They hadn't just collected moments. They'd hunted for them. Every slip, every tired sigh, every paused thought, they'd stored them like ammunition. I wasn't reading evidence. I was reading surveillance notes. I felt something inside me shift. Not a snap, not a break, something steadier, like a line being drawn. I was grieving, not unraveling. There's a difference. They just never learned to see it. That's where it all started. I closed the folder slowly, like shutting a door I never meant to open. They built a version of me they can control. I said, the words didn't tremble. They settled, became real, became mine. I'm going to build the truth back, page by page. I went to the table, pulled out my notebook, the one with the worn spine and the coffee stain along the bottom. I opened to a clean page and drew a line across the top with a steady hand. Day 1, Journal of Sound Mind. Writing the words felt like reclaiming a part of myself they hadn't managed to steal. I sat there for a moment, pen hovering over the paper, when a memory surfaced without warning. That park bench photo, the angle, the lighting, the placement. I remembered the man sitting near the bus stop, the one who kept glancing up from his phone, the one who didn't look away when my eyes met his. And before I even finished the date, it hit me like a stone dropped in still water. The man who took that photo wasn't a stranger. It wasn't the man's face that stood out. It was how he didn't look away when our eyes met. Everyone else had been so careful, so strategic in how they pretended not to see me. But not him. He wanted me to see him. That moment unraveled something, a thread I hadn't dared to pull on until now. I flipped through my memory like scanning photos in reverse. Where had I seen him before? And then it landed. The brunch. The one Callista insisted I attend, saying, it'll be good for optics. Just show up, smile. Look like family again. I had arrived 10 minutes early. That was my first mistake. Early meant visible. It meant being handed a name tag that said, Mrs. Venn Guest. Not Soraya. Not family. Guest. I stood there, pretending it didn't sting. Pretending I didn't hear the volunteer ask Callista, do you want her at your table? And Callista replying just a little too loudly, oh, anywhere's fine. Really? She's low maintenance. They seated me on a foldable chair beside the bathroom door. I could hear the toilet flush every 6 minutes. A woman came out at one point, smiled sympathetically, and said, bless your heart. I'd switch, but I've got vertigo. Guest. Not daughter. Not sister. Just someone filling a chair. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Conversations buzzed around me like I was the dead spot in a party. I tried to focus on the little fruit tart on my plate until I heard someone whisper behind me. That's her, right? The one who's been off since the divorce. I heard she doesn't even drive anymore. Then laughter, a forced, rehearsed kind of laugh. I turned slowly. They didn't flinch. One woman even raised her glass to me like we were old friends. They gave her that seat so she'd feel included. I smiled. That was worse than crying, because it meant something inside me had gone still. Looking back now, I should have walked out, but I didn't. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Callista's voice rang out like stage direction. Everyone! Quick toast before the silent auction begins. She held her mimosa up with practiced ease. My sister's here today, and we're just so thrilled she could make it. She spends a lot of time in her head these days, so it's nice to see her out and about. Chuckles. Not loud, but enough. My head turned slowly toward her. Her eyes met mine across the room. She smiled. Not warmth, not love, just that perfect curve of a woman who knew the camera was rolling. She didn't just humiliate me. She designed the scene. She laid the rug, then pulled it mid-toast. That's where it all started. And suddenly, I remembered Thanksgiving 3 years ago, post-divorce. The family table already set when I arrived, Callista's kids on one end, my father at the other. My place card was missing. Someone scrambled to bring a folding tray and told me, it's better over here, closer to the outlet for your phone. I smiled then too, told myself it was practical, told myself it didn't mean what I knew it meant. And then another memory surfaced, Dad's birthday photo. Everyone in it, but me. They told me I'd just missed the group shot. I hadn't. I'd taken the photo. This wasn't new. I'd just stopped noticing. I pulled out my phone and began documenting. Not emotionally, tactically. A picture of the chair placement. The bathroom sign peeking out beside my name tag. Notes on what was said. Who laughed? Who didn't? I wasn't collecting memories anymore. I was collecting evidence. If they were building a case, so was I. But mine wouldn't need a script. It would bleed truth. As the event wrapped, I stood near the door, waiting for my moment. Callista passed by with a smug little wave. I stepped in close, leaned just enough so she'd feel the air shift. Thank you for the seat, I whispered. I won't forget it. Her smile twitched just for a second, but she didn't miss a beat. Of course, anything for family. That's when I knew. They weren't scared I'd fall apart. They were scared I'd hold it together long enough to expose them. Someone's fingers brushed my arm just as I turned away from Callista. It wasn't a gentle touch. It had weight, history, authority. I didn't have to look to know who it belonged to. My father stood there in the late daylight, the parking lot half empty behind him, hands folded in front of his coat, as if he were about to deliver a sermon. I felt my breath tighten under my ribs, the way it used to when I was a child called into the living room for a talk. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. He smiled, a careful, rehearsed expression that never reached his eyes. I've been trying to catch you, he said. You left quickly. His tone carried something unnerving, like he'd been rehearsing this moment longer than I realized. Watching him, I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to make myself smaller, easier, quieter. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. I wanted to speak privately, he added, away from the noise. He glanced toward the building as if the people inside were strangers, not relatives he'd spent his life protecting. I nodded because silence was easier than giving him something he could twist. That's where it all started. He stepped closer. We're doing this because we care, he said, voice pitched soft, almost fatherly. You've changed, Soraya. You're not yourself lately. His words floated between us, sweetened with concern, but the bitterness underneath burned. Not myself, I repeated, or not yours anymore. I kept my voice steady, but my heart hammered like it was trying to warn me. His mouth tightened. Your sister only wants stability. Things have been difficult for you. She's worried. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch. They were not asking if I was okay. They were deciding that I wasn't, and they'd been deciding it for a long time. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. As he talked, my mind jumped to something I hadn't thought about in weeks. The afternoon Callista borrowed my phone. Her battery had died, she said, and she needed to confirm a salon appointment. She held my phone for 10 minutes, maybe more, tapping with surprising speed. Later that night, I went to show my therapist a message I'd written during a difficult moment, and it was gone. A few dates in my calendar were missing too. At the time, I told myself it was a glitch. Funny how easily we lie to ourselves when the truth hurts more. Now, standing in the parking lot, my father giving me a lecture on concern, the pieces clicked. They hadn't just deleted proof. They deleted me from the version of events they were assembling. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I took a steady breath. Dad, did you read the petition before you signed it? He looked away. Not long. Just enough to tell me everything. We're trying to help, he repeated. That's what family does. My chest tightened. What family does? I echoed. Is that what Dr. Lowell did too? He froze. I saw his throat move. A small swallow he couldn't hide. I'd struck something, hit a seam in the polished narrative. 2 days earlier, I'd learned from Gerald that Dr. Emery Lowell, our longtime family doctor, had written a signed statement describing me as disoriented, emotionally volatile, and unable to maintain clarity during routine visits. The visit she referred to, a day I had a migraine, so intense I could barely keep my eyes open. I remember apologizing to her for being slow to respond. I remember her reassuring me it was okay, that migraines affect cognitive processing. She didn't mention she'd later weaponized that moment. She didn't mention she attended one of Callista's charity luncheons the week before documenting it. She certainly didn't mention she'd met privately with my father and sister. When I called her office to request clarification, her assistant repeated a single phrase like she was reading from a script. Dr. Lowell cannot comment. Conflict of interest. I didn't fully understand what that meant. Until now, watching my father avoid my gaze. You talked to her, I said quietly, before my appointment. His jaw tensed. Let's not turn this into something ugly, Soraya. He wanted me to feel ashamed for asking questions. That old, familiar tactic, the one used to keep me small, compliant, agreeable. Looking back now, I should have seen the script forming. That's where it all started. I'm not turning anything, I said. You already did. His face shifted just slightly, but I saw it. The moment dignity cracked. Then he stepped back, disappointment etched across his features, as if I'd failed some invisible test. Your sister is only trying to help you stay grounded. You've been unpredictable. Unpredictable. Their favorite word when I refused to play the role they wrote. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, not sadness, something steadier, a foundation beginning to pour. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I'm leaving, I said, stepping back. You should go too. He sighed as though I'd exhausted him. You're making this difficult. No, I said, I'm finally making it honest. I turned and walked to my car, hands trembling, my breath shallow, but my spine straighter than it had been in months. Once inside, I didn't start the engine right away. I sat there, palms pressed against the steering wheel, letting the truth land in pieces. They weren't confused. They weren't worried. They were coordinating. That realization cracked open something deeper, a need to regain control of my story. I drove home and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, a moment of stillness before intention. Then I created a new folder on my drive. Timeline of Mental Clarity, Soraya Venn. I uploaded everything I had, journals, emails I'd sent myself, appointment notes, dates, receipts, even screenshots of conversations. They framed my silence as confusion. I was going to let my records speak louder than their accusations. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. As I organized files, a new email notification appeared. The sender wasn't saved in my contacts. The subject line was a single word, FYI. Inside was a forwarded calendar invite, a private meeting scheduled weeks before my doctor's last exam. Attendees, Callista Vale, Dr. Emery Lowell. Subject, documentation alignment. My breath caught, but my hands stayed steady. They weren't just watching me. They were coordinating. The moment I saw that forwarded meeting invite, something inside me went still, like a door closing in a dark hallway. If they were aligning their stories, then it was time I started writing mine, on my terms, in a voice none of them could bury. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The letter came the following afternoon. A thick envelope with my father's handwriting angled across the front, neat as ever, like he was signing a holiday card. I held it for a moment before opening it, feeling the weight of something I hadn't named yet, a warning disguised as formality. When I tore it open, a legal notice slid out, a claim stating that my home, the one I'd poured years of savings and labor into, was not solely owned by Soraya Venn. They listed my father as primary holder, Callista as managing agent, and me as occupant. Occupant. The word landed with a quiet thud in my chest, as if I were some tenant, as if my life were a room they could vacate whenever it suited them. They didn't just want to remove me from the family. They wanted to evict me from myself. Looking back now, I should have recognized the pattern. Whenever I built something, they found a way to claim it. That's where it all started. I walked through the living room, slowly, brushing my fingertips across the wall I'd repainted after my divorce. I remembered sanding the trim, patching the nail holes, choosing the warm beige color because it reminded me of my mother's old recipe cards. Every dent, every repair, every quiet night I'd spent reclaiming my life was now being twisted into evidence of tenancy. There had been a banking delay years ago, a temporary fix requiring my father's name on the deed. He promised it was only for 6 months. At the time, I believed him. Back then, I still believed I mattered enough to be told the truth. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. As I stood in my kitchen, the air felt thick, as if the walls were holding their breath. The doorbell rang softly. Ezra was at the steps, his face pale, eyes darting like he was checking for shadows. He stepped inside before I could ask. The boy looked older than 16, right then. Not tired, burdened. "Aunt Soraya," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I think you need to see this." He handed me his phone. My hands tightened as I pressed play. It was a recording, a quiet room, muffled voices. Then my mother's voice, fragile but steady. "She's the one who stayed," she said. "Soraya watered the roses when I couldn't walk. This house should be hers." My breath caught. My knees nearly buckled. Ezra's voice trembled. "I filmed Nana last year. She asked me to, but it was deleted. Dad said he cleaned my iCloud because my storage was full." I stared at him. "But you still have it." He nodded. "I kept a manual backup. I hid it. I don't know why. I just didn't want it gone." I felt the grief hit me in slow, sharp waves. Not the grief of losing her. I'd lived with that ache for years, but the grief of knowing they'd tried to erase what she said. Erase the connection she had only with me. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who smile when you walk into the room. Looking back now, I realized that video didn't just give me proof. It gave me back a piece of myself. That's where it all started. I played the recording again and again. My mother's voice became a kind of anchor, soft, honest, unfiltered. I touched the flash drive gently, holding it like something sacred. "They can fight over the papers," I murmured. "I have my mother's will, and it's louder than all of theirs. A will written in truth, not ink." I backed the file up 3 times. Cloud, external drive, encrypted folder. Then I sent it to Gerald with a single line. "Use when needed." My fingers shook, but not from fear. It was focus. Pure, clear focus. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Later that evening, the house felt different. Not safer, but clearer. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of every memory that made this place mine. I sat on the floor with old boxes scattered around me, searching for anything that could strengthen my case. I found photos, ticket stubs, notes from my mother tucked inside cookbooks. One box was heavier than the rest. Inside it, I found a framed picture of the 3 of us, my mother, my father, and me during a summer trip long before everything cracked. Tucked behind the frame was a piece of paper folded into thirds. Her handwriting. I knew it instantly. If they ever try to take the house, the note read, "Show them this photo. You were always the one who made it home." I pressed my forehead against the paper, letting the scent of old ink and memory settle. My grief didn't break me this time. It fortified me. They had underestimated the strength of someone who survived abandonment twice. First emotionally, now legally. That's where it all started. My house, my memories, my truth. They thought I'd crumble when they touched the bricks. But they forgot I am the foundation. And the cracks they tried to paint over, I was about to make sure the court saw every one of them. That thought carried me through the next morning as I organized every file, every journal entry, every photo into folders, one for Gerald, one backed up to a secure drive, and one locked behind a password only I knew. My kitchen table looked like a command center, and for the first time in months, I felt something steady beneath my ribs. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I was halfway through scanning another handful of receipts when a knock sounded at the door. 2 short taps, 1 long. It wasn't a neighbor's knock. It wasn't delivery. It was hesitant, anxious, familiar. When I opened the door, Ezra stood on the mat, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like he expected someone to be watching from the driveway. "Aunt Soraya, can I come in?" His voice cracked slightly, the way a teenager's does when they're trying to sound braver than they feel. I stepped aside, and he slipped past me quickly, glancing back once before I shut the door. Looking back now, I should have seen just how frightened he was. That's where it all started. He sat at the edge of my couch, phone clenched in both hands. "I need to show you something," he said, "but you can't let them know I came here." His words were shaky, but his eyes held something resolute. I nodded and lowered myself into the chair across from him. He tapped his phone screen. A recording began to play. A quiet room, muffled voices at first. Then Callista's voice emerged, crisp and cold. "Once she's ruled incompetent, the house goes on the market immediately." My pulse hammered. Then my father's voice, tired but certain, "She'll sign anything if we make it look routine." My fingers twitched. The phone in my hand felt heavier with every passing second. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fact. They hadn't been guessing or hoping. They had been planning, coordinating, and they were ready to execute the moment the court granted them control. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Ezra swallowed. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was in the hallway. They didn't know I was there. He looked up, guilt swimming across his expression. I couldn't keep it to myself. Not after hearing them talk about you like you were some problem they needed to get rid of. My breath caught, but I kept my voice calm. "You did the right thing, Ezra." He shook his head. "My dad said I was overreacting, that I misunderstood. But I know what I heard. I recorded it because I knew they'd deny it." A surge of protectiveness swept through me, a fierce, unexpected warmth. This boy, 16 years old, had more integrity than the adults who raised him. At 16, he made the choice most adults fear, to stand against his own blood. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I reached for my journal, the old leather-bound one I kept in a drawer. When I opened it to tuck the flash drive inside, something slipped out. An envelope, the paper yellowed with age. My mother's handwriting stretched across the front in delicate script. "In case they turn on you." I froze. My breath stilled. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter, written in the final weeks of her life. "Soraya, my heart, you are not the failure they whisper about. You are my mirror, quiet, deep, and unbreakable. If the time comes when your voice is overshadowed, remember who you are." The words blurred as tears rose, silent and controlled. My mother hadn't left me money or property. She left me truth, a clarity that sliced through every lie they'd tried to build around me. Looking back, I didn't realize the strength that letter would give me. That's where it all started. Ezra watched me gently press the letter back into the journal. My dad found out I took the file. He admitted. He told me to delete it, or he'd ground me until graduation. I lifted my eyes. "And what did you do?" He shrugged, a small defiant smile forming. "I deleted it from the cloud, not from the world." That smile, shy but unbroken, hit me harder than any blow my family had delivered. It meant he'd chosen truth over comfort, justice over silence. It meant someone in this family still recognized the value of doing what was right, even when it cost him. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I stood and walked to the small dish by the sink where I kept spare keys. Picking one up, I pressed it into his palm. If anything happens, don't go to your mom. Don't go to your dad. Come here. He nodded, and the nod wasn't a child agreeing. It was a young man choosing where he stood. We sat near the fireplace after that, the quiet settling between us like a blanket. The flames flickered softly, reflecting in his eyes. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid to fall asleep in my own house. Not because the danger was gone, but because someone else finally saw what they were doing to me. Looking back now, I should have recognized that moment of peace for what it was, strength gathering. That's where it all started. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Gerald. You need to see this before they do. You're going to want to be ready. I opened the file he sent, and the first page alone made my heartbeat quicken. They had gone even further than I thought. Justice doesn't always wear robes. Sometimes it comes in sneakers and a cracked iPhone. And when I opened the file, I realized they had gone even further than I thought. Gerald's message was short, just a single line. They're using this in court tomorrow. Read every slide. I opened the attached PowerPoint, and within seconds, I could feel my heartbeat shift. Not race, just slow, deepen. That kind of pulse you get when your body prepares for war. The first slide was my name in bold, underneath the words guardianship petition, evidence packet. The second, a timeline, not of my life, but of carefully selected moments, dates pulled out of context, moments when I cried, canceled a lunch, forgotten to return a call. They had taken my pain and stitched it into a narrative I didn't recognize. Slide after slide, they built a version of me I wouldn't trust either. Excerpts from my journals, ones I'd written during therapy. Photos, like the one on the park bench. Video clips, cropped and captioned without the full conversation. They didn't just try to erase me. They tried to rewrite the chapters one was still living. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The morning of the hearing, the clouds hung heavy above the courthouse, like even the sky knew what kind of silence we were walking into. Ezra sat beside me in the gallery, his hood pulled over his head, fists clenched in his lap. Gerald brushed invisible lint off his sleeve. I walked in alone. Callisto arrived in a navy blazer, crisp white blouse, lips painted a soft mauve that said, "I'm calm, I'm caring, I'm in control." Our father walked behind her, jaw locked, nodding tightly at everyone who made eye contact. The air in the courtroom wasn't hostile. It was rehearsed, polished, like a performance was about to begin. Looking back, I should have known they weren't here for justice. They were here for applause. That's where it all started. Callista's attorney opened like he was delivering a eulogy. "We're here out of love," he said, "to protect, not to punish." He painted me in soft strokes, episodes of confusion, withdrawal from family, difficulty managing emotional and financial decisions. He spoke like I was already gone, like this was about ensuring I didn't hurt myself in my fragile state. They presented their exhibits, the park bench photo, a video clip where I forgot the day, recorded during a migraine, 2 statements from coworkers I barely remembered, one saying I seemed scattered, Another claiming I drifted during meetings. They built a wall out of shadows, but I didn't flinch. Let them stack their bricks. The higher the tower, the louder the fall. Then the room shifted. Gerald stood. Your Honor, we would like to call Maud and Lerner to the stand. Callista blinked. Her attorney stiffened. Mauden walked to the witness box in her quiet shoes and her pressed blouse, wearing her nurse's pin like a medal. Her voice was soft, but steady. I've played Scrabble with Soraya every Sunday for the past year. She said, she keeps score better than I do. A pause. She brings tea. We talk about books, politics. She's lucid. She's engaged. She's the one who noticed when my blood pressure medication needed adjusting. I trust her with more than my friendship. I trust her with my health. Callista's attorney tried to pounce. You're a family friend? Mauden didn't blink. No, I'm a neighbor. I became her friend because I could tell she was alone and sane. The shift was subtle. A juror leaned forward. The judge's pen paused mid-note. Someone in the gallery nodded. For the first time all morning, I felt the weight on my shoulders shift slightly off-center. I looked at Callista. Her smile had stiffened. The lines around her eyes tightened. She whispered something to our father, who didn't respond. He just stared ahead, jaw clenched, as if the gavel had already dropped. Mauden stepped down, and I gave her a soft smile. One that didn't say, thank you so much as I see you. During the break, Gerald turned to me. We haven't used the audio yet. I nodded. Save it. Let her talk first. They wanted the world to see me shattered. I was about to show them who was holding the hammer. The last thing I heard before the courtroom door shut was Bellora laughing at her own joke. It followed me like a stain I couldn't scrub out. 3 weeks earlier, I had been walking up the side steps of that house, gift bag in hand, balancing a dish I'd made myself. The sun had caught me in the face as I reached the gate, and for a second, I blinked against it, thinking maybe this time it would be different. But now, as the judge re-entered the courtroom, I knew better. The shift in the air was almost physical, like someone had opened a door to winter and dared me to walk through it barefoot. My palms tingled, not from fear, from clarity. I stood slowly, smoothing the front of my jacket. It was a tiny gesture, but it steadied the storm in me. Gerald, my attorney, gave a small nod. Precise, reassuring. Each step to the witness stand was deliberate. My heels clicked softly on the polished floor, small, echoing declarations. I sat down, and the chair's firm back grounded me more than any deep breath ever could. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Callista's lawyer stepped forward with a courtroom smile, too polished to be sincere. Ms. Venn, he said slowly, do you believe your family is acting in bad faith? It wasn't a trap. It was an invitation. And he shouldn't have given it to me. They filed for guardianship. I said, the same week they signed a contract to sell my home. The room held its breath. I opened the folder in front of me and raised the printed email, dated, time-stamped. They accidentally CC'd my insurance address. That's how I found out. A wave of silence washed over the courtroom, followed by soft murmurs, then sharper gasps. That's not admissible, Callista snapped. Her voice broke slightly. The judge raised a hand. Ms. Vale, you will wait your turn. I didn't look at her. I wasn't speaking to her. I was speaking to the room. And they discussed how to manipulate my behavior before any doctor had assessed me. Gerald pressed play. Ezra's recording filled the room. Callista's voice first. She'll sign if we make it routine. We can use Drayton's name. It's safer legally. Then my father. She'll do what we tell her. She always has. I didn't flinch. I didn't crumble. My heart didn't break. It realigned. Callista stood halfway up. That was taken out of. Sit down, the judge snapped. Now. His voice left no room for excuses. Only consequence. I lifted the photo from my bag. My mother's handwriting curled on the back. You were always the one who made it home. I held it toward the judge. Not for drama, for truth. I wasn't confused. I said quietly. I was quiet. There's a difference. And I've spent my life being punished for it. That sentence didn't come from anger. It came from memory, from years of being told, don't overthink. Just go along. Don't upset your sister. They tried to weaponize my silence. But stillness is not surrender. The judge leaned back. His gaze moved to Callista and my father. Do you have any further evidence, he asked, that does not rely on manipulation, selective documentation, or private conversations taken out of context? Their attorneys shifted uncomfortably. My father looked down. Callista's hands trembled. No, Your Honor. The judge gave a single nod. Then the guardianship petition is dismissed, with prejudice. My breath left my body, long, steady, not relief, something quieter, something like reclamation. But the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, he said, I am issuing a no-contact order. Ms. Vale, Mr. Vale, you are prohibited from contacting Ms. Venn for a minimum of 12 months. And I am forwarding this case for review on potential financial manipulation and elder fraud. Callista let out a sound I'd never heard from her. Half sob, half disbelief. Not sorrow. Shock. The kind that comes when a mirror finally replaces the stage. We exited the courtroom slowly. Ezra met me halfway down the hall. He wrapped his arms around me and whispered into my hair, You were never crazy. You were just unheard. Only then did I realize how tightly I'd been holding myself together. I leaned into him just for a moment, and the air didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt possible. Gerald walked beside me down the courthouse steps. It's over, he said. I shook my head. Not quite. I still have to decide who gets to stay in my life. The sunlight hit my face at the bottom step, warm, unfiltered, like hearing my own name spoken with respect for the first time. They lost the case, but I reclaimed the part of me they tried to silence. And as I stepped into the evening light, I realized peace didn't sound like silence at all. It sounded like my name finally belonging to me again. Not borrowed, not managed, not rewritten. Mine. I breathed in the cool air behind my house and followed the narrow garden path that curved along the fence. The dusk settled in soft shades of blue, wrapping the yard in a kind of hush that felt almost like a blessing. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Inside the house, the quiet felt different now. It wasn't heavy, just still like a room after the last guest has gone home. Ezra's shoes sat by the door. One tipped on its side the way teenagers always leave them. His backpack rested against the banister. The small signs of another person's presence no longer felt intrusive. They felt grounding, like anchors pulling me back into my own life. Looking back now, I should have seen how much I needed that. That's where it all started. I walked into the kitchen and filled the kettle, listening to the soft creak of floorboards overhead as Ezra settled into the guest room I'd cleared for him. His parents hadn't called. They hadn't come looking for him. That silence was louder than any argument they'd ever thrown at me. Part of me ached for him, knowing he was learning too young that some families choose convenience over truth. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. As I reached for the teacups, my phone buzzed on the counter. The caller ID made my stomach clench. Dad. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, feeling my breath slow. Eventually, I answered. His voice came through strained, wrapped in something that sounded like shame but wasn't quite apology. I know you're angry, he began, but we were trying to protect the family. I closed my eyes, letting his words linger long enough to reveal their real shape. By selling me off like a problem you didn't want to solve? A pause. You're still my daughter. I let out a soft breath. Then you should have acted like my father. Silence stretched between us. Hollow, familiar. For years, I'd filled that silence with excuses, trying to mold myself into something he'd value. Not anymore. I wasn't hanging up on him. I was hanging up on the person I used to become just to make him proud. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. When the call ended, the house settled around me again. Not lonely, just mine. Over the next few weeks, the routines Ezra and I built formed quietly like moss taking root on stone. Breakfast on Sundays, pancakes for him, tea for me, evenings where we sat near the fireplace, reading in silence. There was no pressure to speak, no need to perform emotion or manage anyone's expectations. I didn't realize it then, but that stretch of calm was part of my healing. That's where it all started. I opened my laptop one afternoon and began to write again, something I'd stopped doing after the divorce, when every word felt like it carried someone else's judgment. This time, the words came slowly but honestly. Personal essays about resilience, about reclaiming my own narrative, about the difference between solitude and abandonment. I used my real name, and it felt right. Out in the yard, the garden started to bloom again. Ezra learned how to prune the roses properly. I showed him once, and he took to it with quiet focus. We installed a wooden bench beneath the old maple tree, right where my mother and I used to sit when the world felt too loud. On the back of the bench, I carved a line, she used to tell me. She watered more than plants. She grew second chances. Every time I sat there, I felt like I was sitting beside her again, not in grief, but in memory, a kind of memory that no longer hurt. One evening, I walked into the living room and saw the framed photo of my mother holding me as a child. Behind it, the note she'd written was still tucked safely in place. I didn't need to read it. I knew every word. But sometimes I did anyway, not for proof, but for comfort. I didn't realize it then, but that small ritual would become a kind of quiet prayer. That's where it all started. The case made local news shortly after the verdict. Reporters reached out wanting statements about guardianship abuse and family betrayal. I declined. The truth already echoed loud enough. I told Gerald. And I meant it. Callista and my father never called again. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Their silence felt like the end of a chapter I'd spent my entire adulthood trying to rewrite. One evening, Ezra and I sat together on the bench, sipping tea while the crickets started their nightly chorus. He looked at me with a question that didn't come from curiosity, but from a place deeper, somewhere between longing and understanding. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought. "Sometimes," I said, "but I never miss who I had to be to keep them. They lost the house, but I found home." So maybe the lesson isn't about justice in court. Maybe it's about justice in your own voice. How many of us have been told we were too quiet, too emotional, or just too much? What would happen if you stopped proving your worth and just claimed it? If this story hits something deep for you, leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.